Hi, good evening. Welcome to Community Focus here on Channel 6 TV. Glad you could join us tonight. I'm Kenny Fogel. Glad you could be with us. And we're going to talk a little politics right now. As you know, next Tuesday coming up, it's Election Day. So that's the day that you get your chance to talk. We've had people doing a lot of talking over the last year, a lot of campaigning. But on Election Day, that's up to you. So today we're doing one more thing. We're trying to educate the public a little bit and educate ourselves a little bit. And Mr. Ryan Quarles here with us today. And Mr. Quarles, we appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. And you're going to be running for Agriculture Commissioner, I understand.
That's right. I'm running for Commissioner of Agriculture here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And I'm running for one main reason. Kentucky deserves a commissioner with a real farm background. I grew up just up near Lexington in Georgetown, Kentucky. Grew up on a tobacco farm. Grew up, earned my way through school, earned my way through college, and my family's been farming in Kentucky since the 1790s. And I, like countless other Kentuckians, can relate to that. And my childhood was spent, mowing hay, baling hay, even shoveling cow manure, which I like to say.
Sound like me, you grew up on the same farm.
That's right.
That's what I thought farming was.
Yeah. And it's that sort of background, which I think should be a prerequisite for serving as Commissioner of Agriculture. You got to know what it's like to get your hands dirty, wear out a pair of work boots. And I grew up in 4-H and the Future Farmers of America, and even won the state tractor driving competition, which my older brother never did, and I always remind him about that. And the reason I tell you about that is that Kentucky has such a strong identity with agriculture and farming that we need somebody who can relate to that. And I went on to University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, studied agriculture economics. Also spent a couple summers in Washington, D.C. learning agriculture policy. Worked on the Hill in the Senate, and also spent a summer learning about agriculture exports and the international market while I worked for the Foreign Agriculture Service.
I was asking before we go too much further is why? Because obviously 20, 30 years ago, you wasn't thinking you were going to run for Agriculture Commissioner someday. I mean, why were you so interested in agriculture?
Yeah, well, I've always had an interest because when I was a young kid, I used to compete a lot at the Kentucky State Fair, and I saw Commissioner Billy Ray Smith, passing out ribbons, and I always kind of wondered what that was all about. But while I've served in the Kentucky General Assembly, I have learned that the Department of Agriculture affects every Kentuckian more than just 3 times a day when they eat. And in many counties, including the counties here, farming is still the major economic driver. And I grew up with a lot of farm families in this area. And it's important that people realize the process and how their food moves from the farm gate to the dinner plate. Or take the bourbon industry, for example, right here in Bardstown. When the bourbon industry grows, it's more opportunity for Kentucky farmers. We want to make sure that the bourbon folks are using Kentucky grains. Only about 40% of the grain used in bourbon comes from Kentucky. And that's why it's important to help foster an understanding about why agriculture is important, because chances are Kentucky farmers are already doing a great job, and there's room to grow.
Well, and you mentioned earlier about studying agriculture. I mean, like you mentioned, we both grew up on farms. I did the same thing, and shoveling hay and cutting tobacco, things of that nature. But the more you learn about the agribusiness of it, there's a whole lot more to agriculture than the average person understands.
And if you were to put an economic value on agriculture in Kentucky, $6 billion in farm gate receipts. I mean, those are receipts that go directly into a farmer's pocket. And you got to think, when that local economic driver, when those farmers get paid after selling their crop, that money stays in the community, it gets turned back around. And for a lot of us, that is still a major component of the economy. And studies have shown that up to 1 in 5 jobs are agriculture related. And so when I look at the Department of Agriculture, I look at it more than just being a voice for farmers, being an advocate for agribusiness. I also look at it as an opportunity for economic development. Because whenever you take that raw product off the farm and turn it into an intermediate or final product, it's called value added. You're adding value to that product. That's where jobs are created. And I think it's important that we aggressively recruit agribusinesses and help sustain local value added processing in every Kentucky county.
How do you stay in communication with farmers? They're spread all over the state. I mean, what would be a typical week or day for you as a Commissioner of Agriculture?
Well, Commissioner Comer's done a great job turning the Department of Agriculture around. And one of his assets that he is accessible. And so we're going to spend a lot of time traveling. We're going to spend a lot of time communicating, and also use the Department of Agriculture as a catalyst for various components of what the department does. And one might be promoting Kentucky Proud products. Another one might be continuing the great efforts we've had with agriculture education, bringing agriculture out of the fields and bringing it into the classroom, or focusing on international trade, or pushing back against harmful regulations from the federal government. But one thing that's really neat that from my generation of farmers is that they all have iPhones and smart pads, and I can't tell you how many contemporaries I keep in touch with by using Facebook. And that's something we need to do a better job of.
These tractors today, I mean, I don't remember having air conditioning and the big all the iPads and everything built into them.
And, the technology used in agriculture, a lot of people don't realize how sophisticated it is and how expensive it is. The GPS, the Global Positioning System, was invented by the military. But long before cars had GPS units, the farming community started using it in the mid-90s. And so a lot of people don't realize that. Drone technology, the next frontier in drone technology will be servicing our farms, and there will be commercial drone operators here in Kentucky who are using that technology to make sure we're more efficient.
Makes crop dusting a whole lot different than it used to be. So if I was an average farmer here in Nelson County, why would I want you as my Commissioner of Agriculture? What would you do for me?
Well, the number one thing is that I'm going to be an advocate for you, not only in Frankfort, but also in Washington, D.C. We need an agriculture commissioner who grew up on a farm, an agriculture commissioner who understands the issues that affect them the most, and one that they know, whether you're a small-time farmer or a big farmer or an agribusiness owner or even a consumer on the consumer end of agriculture, that you're going to be someone who stands up for local business, for Kentucky farm-grown products, and also one that keeps an eye out towards harmful regulation. In Frankfort, I serve in the Kentucky General Assembly, and every year we have thousands of bills filed, and some of them may be well-intentioned, but they have bad consequences for the farming community. So it's important that we have an ag commissioner that also plays defense and helps shepherd some of this legislation.
Well, as the urban areas are starting to encroach into what was rural lands years ago, the mix sometimes is a little difficult.
That's right. And it reminds me of a story I've heard a lot. There was a farmer, a subdivision was built next to that individual's farm, and people built these nice houses, and they moved into the country, and within a week of moving to their dream house, they called to complain because the cattle were moving after 11 o'clock at night. And so those are the sorts of misperceptions and issues that sometimes we have to start at a basic level. We have to teach kids that chocolate milk does not come from brown cows, and that we need to make sure that there's a good working relationship between our rural farming communities and our urban centers, but also consumers. A lot of consumers may not know that their food comes from a Kentucky family farm. It's safe, it's abundant, and we're part of the best food supply system in the world. And so sometimes on the farming side, we need to do a better job of telling our story, telling our narrative, because if we don't do it, sometimes anti-agriculture groups will do it for us. And that's something I think the Department of Agriculture can do, is kind of play that role as an educator, but also one as an advocate for our farmers.
Well, as an advocate for farmers, again, you mentioned going to Washington, D.C., and I know Kentucky's farming alone has changed so much. I mean, years ago, we were predominantly tobacco state, and we were predominantly, well, even in this area, at one time, of the largest hog operations in the state of Kentucky right here. We don't see them anymore.
Yeah. It's changed a lot. There's been a lot of transitions. We keep losing dairies in Kentucky as well. I grew up on a tobacco farm. Tobacco, we have about $300 million of net worth each year on the production side. And so it's important that we have a good working relationship with not just our federal delegation in case we need changes with the law, such as industrial hemp, but also have a good working relationship with our research institutions. We're fortunate to have several high-quality higher education programs in Kentucky, and we need to engage them and work in a collaborative nature so that if there is an emerging crop, whether it be industrial hemp, hops for our beer industry.
I've never seen a hop. I've always wanted to see one.
Well, believe it or not, there's a growing craft beer industry in Kentucky. And they want Kentucky-grown hops, but they have to buy it from Germany or Montana. And so we need to get the research done to see whether or not we can grow that here. Or even canola, or even canaf, which is a fibrous plant that some automotive parts are already made out of, but the canaf's grown halfway across the world. We need to look at those
Well,
opportunities.
I know last year they come up. Tobacco was a big answer to the Ebola crisis last
That's
year.
right.
So that was something nobody expected, but it's been in the works for quite a while.
And who would have thought that tobacco would be an unlikely vehicle to help solve a problem affecting the world? And that happened right here in Kentucky, down in Owensboro. And it's important that we encourage that sort of innovation and also give them appropriate relief and innovative techniques from the government to make sure that we encourage and we attract these sort of researchers so that we can always be on the cutting edge of what's next in agriculture.
Okay. Well, again, election days next week. So been a lot. I'm sure it's been a long campaign. I don't know how much you've enjoyed. I don't know.
I've enjoyed it. We've traveled every nook and cranny of Kentucky. We've traveled over 60,000 miles. I've packed on about 20 pounds of what I like to call my Kentucky Proud Belly.
I was going to say Kentucky Proud.
Yeah, I've earned it, but I'm looking forward to continuing the race. We're running a positive race based on the issues, and it concludes on November 3rd. And it's important that you get out the vote. And I'll tell you why. If you do not get out the vote, a lot of folks stay at home, but they like to complain. And it's important that we are engaged, that we exercise our right to vote that some countries do not have. And here in Kentucky, we can make a difference on November 3rd, next Tuesday. And we'd like to ask you for your vote and your support for Ryan Quarles, that's with a Q, for Commissioner of Agriculture. Thank you very much for having me today.
Well, I appreciate you being here. Ryan Quarles, Commissioner of Agriculture, we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate you tuning in. So stick around. Again, like you said, November 3rd, make sure you show up at the polls. So on November 4th, if you want to complain, it's all yours.
That's right.
We'll be back in a few minutes here on Community Focus right after this.
Thank you.